Will it be okay for the broadcasting thing?
Hi, folks. Hi, folks. Yay, we're here. We made it. Hooray. Welcome. Oh, my.
Yep, it rotated again.
Yep, it did. Oh, no, that's the other one. That's all right. All
Yeah, it's okay. I can make it work.
right,
It needs to
I'll
flip.
adjust. That one needs to go away
Yeah.
anyway. So there we go. Got him.
Mm.
Okay, pardon the
Okay.
technical workshop, folks, but Cathe
It's always
Ray,
a work in progress.
Cathe Ray over on the
Hey there.
left, Needle in a Haystack, needlestack.com. Right down at the bottom is her website. If you have been here when Cathe's been with us before, they have everything. She's going to talk about metallic threads tonight, so we're excited about that. And let's see, let me get the announcements out of the way. So, Cathe tonight doing this, we really appreciate it. And there are, what, 3 previous ones? Yeah, 3.
No, there's
4?
6.
6?
I think it's 6.
Okay, I can't count.
It's at least
Anyway,
it's at least 5.
okay. So in the on the YouTube channel, there's at least 5 where Cathe has talked to us about threads. It's in the live video section, so that's where you go look, and you'll see them all there. Beth volunteered at one time to make them all into one group, and I never got back to her, so we should do that.
Yeah.
Remind me to do that, Beth, please.
Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Sunday.
It's a work in progress.
Yes. Sunday, Hillary Waters Fail is with us as the guest. She'll be our guest. And if you were with us last week, I showed you a photo of one of her pieces of art where she stitches on leaves, like actual living live leaves. She does embroidery of all kinds on them. So Sunday, she'll be our guest. And then next Wednesday, she will be with us live. And so she will show us, we'll have pictures, but then we'll be able to ask her and talk to her about stitching, doing needlework on leaves, which is. But listen,
What kind of leaves does she stitch on?
pretty much you name it, and she'll try it. She's done
Cool.
like maple leaves and fig, and I forget what other. Yeah, she'll
Ginkgo. Ginkgo is
ginkgo.
another
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love ginkgo leaves.
yeah. So if you can listen to the Sunday podcast ahead of time, it will really help you understand and probably generate some questions for you. So if you can, jump on that. That'll be out Sunday, and then join us Wednesday night, because I'm pretty sure if you listen to the thing, you'll have questions, because I know we did as we were going through it and talking with her. But wonderful lady, really talented artist. So she'll be with us live next Wednesday with the podcast on Sunday. No drawing tonight. Last week's winners, the bead kits and pincushion chart. I forget who won the pincushion chart, but those 3 were Phyllis Lundy, Jane Bartik, and Rose Sartori. And then the 3 winners of the flower in its pot sampler were Dee Neely, Susan Berger, and Zaida Stewart. So those are the winners. They got mailed last Friday, I think it was, so you probably already have them. But anyway, they're on their way. So no drawing tonight. I guess that's really it. We talked today in the podcast, in our enabling podcast, where we helped you spend a ton of money. We talked about the Design Collective pincushion book, and Mary Corbett is sold out. And it took her a while, but Cathe carries those. So and Cathe gets all the inspirations books too. So here, let me just make you all by yourself here, Cathe. Hang on.
Oh, okay.
There. So
Let's see,
Cathe
get it
has
in the
that.
right
That's
place.
the
There we
book.
are. Yeah,
Uh,
pin cushions. It's the first in a series that they're planning on doing of a bunch of different kinds of types of designs. Unlike their others where it's really sometimes a specific designer. So we've got
mhm.
ones from different people and a lot of just really cool stuff in the book. If you've never gotten a book from Inspirations before, if you've ever seen their magazine, their books are like an Uber version of their magazine. Their photography is fabulous and their descriptions are really great. And the thing that I really like is their method for doing diagrams is just amazing. So, if you're not really quite sure how to do, in this case, a beaded thing, it's really drawn well for you to do it. So really, really great books. I really like them. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff in here. Like I like this one with the
I
flowers.
know that one. Yeah, that one.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And and one the other thing that's really interesting about their books in particular is because I don't know if I've mentioned it on this before. If you follow people who are uh, live in Commonwealth countries, so things that used to be part of the UK, the design and techniques that people use tend to be very different than we use in the States. When you're growing up, you learn how to do a sort of a different kind of free form think for yourself needlework. And in the States, we tend to kind of concentrate more on telling people how to do a particular project. And so these books are really great because they can take those of us who grew up in sort of that not quite free form and learn how to do some free form things. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're really great books.
Yep. So Cathe has that book if you want to get it. I know Mary Corbett
Yeah.
ordered a bunch and it took forever to get there, so I'm assuming the next order will take forever. But Cathe has them in
Yeah, they
store.
they they got they got stuck off the coast of LA for a long time.
Yeah. So Cathe swam out to the ship and got her own and took care of that
I
problem.
did. I flew down to LA and then I swam them home.
And then I was asking about the helping hands books because I want to
No, not
get
helping, willing.
willing
Willing.
hands because I want to get at least one of
I
those.
mean,
And
you could be helping, but
well, I'm just it's whatever works.
so this is the first one. This was published like I don't know 5 years ago. I've forgotten what the copyright on it is. Um, so Betsy Morgan, who doesn't really publish her design, she really only teaches. When before she retired, she did an agreement with Inspirations as publisher to publish a bunch of her designs. The first book is primarily a tweeze. So you've got these really great boxes of various shapes and sizes to put things in. And again, stitch diagrams that are just amazing. So if you've not done any of Betsy's pieces in a class before, you can successfully do them. And then this last year, they came out with Willing Hands 2, which is the next iteration of her book, and this has more projects in it, not specifically just a tweeze. So, like, she has a design for doing some accessories and a little card pocket with a cardinal. There's a really lovely, let me go back and find it. There's a really lovely red work piece in here that's a bag.
Yeah.
Along with a bunch of
Hmm.
accessories. So, just a really fun book. And we have copies of both. They're 38.95,
Okay.
and they're all of their books are softbound. They're bound really well, but they're softbound. They had been doing hardbound ones for a few years, and it turned out to be really super expensive. The new the new Design Collective books actually are still softbound, but they have a slightly different binding on them. It's a little more textured, which is kind of interesting. And because they're Australians, the book sizes are always a bit bigger than you find for a lot of books in the States. They're either A4 or A, whatever the next size up from that is.
Yeah.
So they're a little bit bigger than our books are, but
Yeah.
really
What I
great
like
books.
about the binding on the Design Collective is it lays open nicely, so you're not fighting to keep it open all the time.
Yeah, if you look in the, so yeah, you probably can't see it in here because the camera's just not really quite good enough on my iPad, but it's bound in such a way that you can, in fact, get it almost completely, you can get it open and get it to lay pretty flat.
Yeah.
It's not as flat as a spiral bound, but it's much flatter than a normally softback book is. So
You
yeah,
don't have
they
to
did a
put
really nice
15
job with it.
paperweights down to make it stay. So
Right.
No,
Right.
no.
yeah.
And it is as I said, that is a first in a series that they're doing of a bunch of different designers around a topic as opposed to a book from a specific designer.
Yeah.
So there's, I think, at least one more planned for this year. With everything with COVID, it takes them much longer to get things not only produced, but published, printed, and, shipping to the States is like worse than trying to get maple syrup out of a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's the Willing Hands 2 is the one that I'll be ordering that because that's
Yeah,
what I
I think
want.
you would like that one. I mean, I liked it just because I like the fact that there's a goose on the cover. I happen to like Canadian geese,
Yeah.
so I thought that was
Yeah.
a really cute design.
Yeah, that's the one I have to
And
get.
not a super feminine one. Some of them tend to be, really girly, and I'm not always even attracted to the really girly ones. Sometimes I like the ones that aren't so girly.
Yeah. Yeah. So just wanted to point out that's a source in the States for you to get if you want those books is a Needle in a Haystack, and that
Yeah.
will actually get it to you in your lifetime rather than coming from overseas.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also carry their magazines. We're on auto for their magazines as well.
Okay, good. Yep. So
Well,
there's
that's
that.
nice to know. So that way, if you just want one copy, yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some people who are essentially on automatic for them. We don't do it quite like a subscription. You pay for each issue as we ship it, as opposed to paying for a bunch ahead of time. Our issues that we should have gotten in, I think it was July, finally came about 6 weeks ago
Oh,
because of
jeez.
all the shipping delays.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like everything, you just be patient. It eventually shows up.
Yep. No, that
Or as I
printing.
tell people these days, it's needlework, not vaccines.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now the printing thing is a real problem. Our printer for the magazine for my day job, basically they've told us we can print your magazine, but any inserts or any special things, no, can't do it. Don't have the people,
Yeah,
can't get the paper, can't get the ink. Just no. We have enough to do your magazine and that's it. I mean that's what
yeah,
and we
yeah. I
have a
think it's going to be a couple of years before that gets
yeah,
fixed.
and we use one of the biggest printers in the country, and they just can't get anything. They can't get, yeah. So that's not going away anytime soon. Nope, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all right, thanks for
Okay.
that. Needle in a Haystack, needlestack.com. I'm taking those down so those are not in the way of the
Okay.
threads. And Cathe is going to talk to us about threads with metal in them tonight.
Yep.
So I'm going to flip over now, Cathe, to your tabletop, and then
Okay.
let's see.
Yep. That's good.
I'm going to rotate
I'll
you.
just flip my threads around.
Well, here, let
And
me rotate
and also,
it.
no, you're good.
Oh,
Nope.
Oh no, you're right. Yeah, it does need to go 180.
there we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's much better. It's always better when you can actually read the labels.
Yeah.
So one of the things Gary asked me about, which isn't specific, which isn't related to the talk about metal threads, was the last time when I talked about silks. We talked about the silk samplings kits that we do, and he wanted me to mention those. So these are we have two. Eventually, I will probably do another 3 different ones with different counts of fabric and different threads in them. I'll try and tilt this so you can actually read it. And so the sampling packs contain thread, needle, the appropriate needles, and different kinds of threads that are appropriate for that count. So the Silk Samplings 2-pack has 37 count Legacy Linen, 40 count Newcastle, a spool of Soie de Prix, Swago blends, a skein of Soie d'Alger, a needle threader, and the appropriate needles. And so it's random colors. So this one is a cream and a natural color, and then we picked kind of, fall kind of colors to go with it. And then it's got the needles and the threader in there. They're tilted so it's not quite so blurry.
Yeah.
And then the other one is for the finer count. So this is Silk Samplings 1. This has the 45, 46 Bristol linen. Depends on who you ask as whether it's 45 or 46. I think it was 45. Kingston
At that
linen,
point, I don't
which
think it matters, does it?
No, not really. The Kingston is the newer even weave version that they did for us all a couple of years ago, which is a 55, 56 count. And then the uneven 5363 Legacy, which is Jean Lee at the Attic's favorite fabric to stitch on. Again, needle threader, needles. And then this has a spool of Soie 100 and a spool of Soie Surfine. So again, sort of random colors. This has 3 different colors of fabric. Actually, this one has a couple of creams and a darker fabric, and then the threads that go in it. So if you're looking for, after our last talk about silk threads, and you want to stitch on the finer count linens, these are a good way to play with them so that they're, and the threads. And eventually I will get back to doing, I want to do one with like 20 to 25 count, and then a 28 to 36 count, and then maybe something with Aida, with like the linen Aida. It's on my list of things to do, which always seems to grow bigger but never smaller. I'm sure no
And
one has any clue what that's like.
yeah. They
Yeah.
are nice little kits. I'm gonna, because I have the silk samplings one, because I was like, okay, can I even stitch on this finer
Yeah, it's a nice way
linen?
to do it, because then you haven't committed to, or even an eighth of a yard of a piece of fabric. So, it's kind of a nice way
Right.
to play with it. And they're big enough pieces. They're about 8 by 9. So they're big enough pieces that you can actually do something fun, and do a little project, but you also don't feel like you have to stitch something because it's a big piece of fabric. And then,
Hmm.
in keeping with the a little bit about what we're doing tonight, I'm going to talk about tonight with metallics, but also on the idea of samplings, Access Commodities, which is where we get all of our Verswa threads from, and a bunch of metallics and other things as well. They do these ensemble de soie. So these are, and there's usually a metallic, an accentuate, or a bijou that's mixed in here as well. These are things that they do so that, I'll turn it the other way so you can actually probably see it a bit better, that's on a color theme. So this is usually mostly silk, a little metallic. Sometimes in this case, there is also a Londonderry linen thread in there. Trying to tilt it so that it's not, so the light above doesn't hit it quite so bad. So there's like, I think 12 or 14 different colors. This is sapphire. There's, this is red, and the red one actually has some silk serpentine and some swash chenille in it. Then this is the turquoise. This is the Caribbean blue. They're all themed around some soie d'Alger color. So you get a nice smattering of different kinds of threads that pair with it. And then this is, I think this is sweet basil. There's a bunch of others as well, but those were the ones I happened to grab. So those are a nice way if you want to play with some mixture of a little bit of metallics, mostly silks, and some things. Those are great to work with. They've also started doing a new ensemble metallic series. So the black one has some of the metallic soft twist trim cord in it. So we carry some metallic threads, which are really trims. You can couch them, and on a really big canvas, you might be able to stitch with them, but they're really intended as trims. So this has like accentuate bijou, 4 weights of the access of the Verswa metallic braid. This one is the red one, and it's got some of the soft duck cord and some of the cardigan. I'll talk about the cardigan in a minute. A gold one's similar to that cardigan, and a bunch of the Verswa metallics. Same for the silver, both the soft twist and the cardigan and the other spooled stuff. And then there's greens as well. So
Okay.
again, another way, if you want stuff that goes together, as opposed to just pick me some random set of things, this is a good way to do them.
I
You were
have
going
to
to ask a
interrupt you,
question?
Cathe. So,
Yeah.
is there any way can we send you a note and say, hey, can we do something like an auto ship on those? I could see that. I need
Yeah.
that in my stash.
Yeah.
I can see I don't think
Yeah.
Deb is on here. Deb DeCrane isn't watching yet, or she hasn't said, so I'm safe.
Yeah, we do auto shipments for some people for things that they collect. So yeah, if you just send us an email and just say, I'd like to do one every month, every 2 months, every 3 months, whatever the time period is, we can do that. And then we'll just keep track of what we've already shipped you.
And how much are
So
those
one of the
kits?
It actually varies based on the color, but they run, so the metallic ones run between, I think, like 31 to about 40. The silk ones run between about 35 to about 50 something, because it depends on what's actually in it.
Yeah. And then
But
your
not super expensive.
and
And
your
then
your little
and
silk
then
things are
our
what?
the silk samplings are 20 and 22.
Yeah.
All right.
So in that
And
price range.
I've got a question. What types of stitches are good to
Uh-huh.
use with these threads? I think she meant the
Well,
packs.
because there's, yeah, the silk samplings or
No,
the,
not
did
this.
you mean the metallic sets or the silk sets? Because there's
Correct.
multiple sizes in there, they're really for different kinds of, and for different kinds of threads or for different kinds of weights. So like the green one for the ensemble de soie, the silk chenille would be something that you would couch. So whether you're doing it on, say, a sampler, it might be too big, thick to couch on, say, a 5363 because it might be out of scale. But it would depend on what it was you were doing with it. It might work better on a 28 to 32, or it would work really nicely as a couch thing on a needlepoint project. Um, this particular one has Swago blends, Soie de Paris, Soie 103, some Soie Perlé, and some of the Londonderry linen threads. So this one's kind of more in the, for say, linen fabric, probably in the, say, 25 to 32 range for most of it. Just depends on which particular thread, which particular pack it is as to what all's in it. There's always at least a Soie d'Alger and usually either a Soie 100 or a Swago blends, which is a thinner one. So if you're looking for something where you wanted to do it for a particular count fabric, you can always just ask us, like, I want to get one of these, but I kind of mostly work with 40 count and above. Would one of them work? And if not, we can always put something together because we do that as well for people.
But they're
So nothing for
really
particular stitches,
yeah.
more for the count of the fabric. So you could do specialty stitches on a needlepoint project. You could do on a denser fabric. You might be more having to do either just straight cross stitch, or you could do embroidery stitches with a lot of it. I do embroidery stitches on higher count linens because sometimes that's more interesting than just doing counted stuff. But you can certainly play with it.
Yeah, I asked Cathe
And
to show these things because they're really just to give you things to play with and experiment with. Um, and so you can decide what works best for you because people are always saying, well, what thread should I use for this linen or what linen should I use for this thread? If you have some of these kits, then you can experiment and figure out what makes you happy, what you like. And
yeah,
they're just
and
really handy
stitching
to
should be
have.
a lot about what makes you happy. I
Yes,
don't know if any of you
absolutely.
guys, I don't know if any of you guys follow Katie Straken on YouTube, on FlossTube, but Katie has
Hmm.
started one of her videos. She shows how to do using the Cartisan. This is the metallic one. So this is and I brought this out since we were talking about metallics tonight. So this is a thread. I really can't call it a thread. It's really a trim. This is a trim where there's a core, and the core is flat, slightly rounded, but mostly flat. And then it's got this really fine metallic thread wrapped all the way around it. So it's not woven or braided like most of the other kinds of ribbons that we see. This really is a trim where they took this thing and then they wrapped it round and around and around a bazillion times. So it's not something that you stitch with to actually stitch with. It's actually something that you would use as a trim. You could couch it. You could glue it down on something. So you could put it on a box. You could put it on an ornament. There's a silk version as well where the core is the same, but the thing that's wrapped around it is actually silk rather than metallic. It doesn't come in a ton of colors. I think it comes in like I think 8 or 12, but it's a fun thing and it's pretty springy. You can kind of tell just from me holding it. It will hold its shape really well. It'll spring a little trying to get it out of the box, but it's not going to completely go wonky on you, which is kind of nice, because then if you put it somewhere and you're trying to couch it down, it's not going to fight you quite so much. So this is a metallic that's not really a thread. It's really a trim, and it's really intended to do trim work with, but you could use it for something interesting if you wanted a metallic look. And like I said, there's also a silk version of it as well. So some of the things that we sell as metal or metallized, there isn't really a whole lot that's really truly metal, because that's a whole other class in its own. A lot of the stuff we sell are metallized threads. So there's something in it that makes it look like metal. This is another trim. This is the soft twist cord, also from Access. This is an actual cord. So it's twisted. It's braided as opposed to flat like the Cardigan is. And so this you could actually technically stitch with if you were doing it on a really loose weave fabric. So if you were doing like a 13 mesh canvas, oh, thanks, Gary. You might be able to actually use this. Usually, and when this comes from Access, the ends actually have a protector around the end of them, because they're not glued on the ends. That's something that you would do yourself. So like with this kind of trim, you would wrap it. Usually what I do is I wrap it with a piece of tape, and then I cut it in the middle of the tape, and then I figure out what I'm going to do with it. And if I need to, I will glue the ends as opposed to just leaving them taped. But this stuff is very drapey. So where the Cardigan is very wiry because it's wrapped around an actual metal core, this is actually very drapey, which is quite nice. So, again, something that if you were doing it on, say, like a 13 mesh canvas, you might actually be able to do a little bit of stitching with it, but it's intended really primarily to be a trim. And it comes in a bunch of different colors. This is the sort of the antique silver, and then there's a copper, and then there's 2 or 3 colors of shades of gold that it comes in. And then, so about, 10 years ago, DMC introduced a thread called Diamant. I actually had it imported into the States for about a year before DMC USA decided to pick it up. This is a strandable thread. It's much easier to work with than DMC's normal metallic that comes in the skein. And about a year and a half, actually 2 years ago, they came out with what they now call Diamante Grande. So this is a much thicker thread. You can actually take these apart. I don't really recommend it, but I've done it because, like with all things,
Why not?
well, you can do it. You just have to, it's like with a lot of things, you have to be careful. It's like taking trebizond apart. It's not really recommended. You can do it if you're careful. So this is, I believe, I think this has 5 or 6 strands in it. So it's about twice as thick as the regular Diamant is. So this would be, the Diamante Grande would be something you would use either to couch, or I would use it on a needlepoint project for like an 18 mesh. The regular Diamant you can actually use as a cross stitch because it's quite a bit thinner. It's only, I think, 3 strands. Yeah, this is made up of 3 that are kind of loosely twisted together. They're not. It's not really. It's not really a strong twist. It's really kind of a loose twist. And so this works better for cross stitch. I wouldn't do it on like a 40 count unless I tried to disassemble it, but on a 28 count, the Diamant on its own works. The Diamante Grande probably would work on probably a 20 count linen or a 20 count Joblin, something like that. And it's thick enough that it'll cover pretty well.
Okay, Cathe, I got to interrupt you here. Cathe, I got to interrupt you. Folks, I've got Margaret monitoring things tonight, so she'll keep the intruders out. So just let it go. She's keeping an eye on it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the comments and going, oh, that's interesting. I wonder where that popped up.
Yeah, we've had a little of that lately. So
yeah, I think that's kind of the nature of the web these days, is people just sort of, kind of pop in places they're not really supposed to.
Yep.
Now this is actually classified as a metal thread. This is Gilt Silk Twist. It's from Access Commodities. It's a not inexpensive thread. It's $22 for a spool of it. It's one of my favorite threads. You can, in fact, actually do embroidery with this. I've done French knots with this thread.
Have you done
So
needle
it
lace with it
has,
yet, Cathe? Have you done any needle
yeah,
lace with it?
I have actually. Yeah.
Okay.
It takes a bit to get the tension correct because of the fact that it's wrapped around a wire.
Okay.
Um, so you have to kind of practice a bit more just to get it to stay in position with where you want it to stay. But yeah, you can do it. I like it because it's got such a great sheen. So it's probably easier to see the sheen when it's in on the spool. Um, the pictures I have on the website, you'll be able to tell a bit more because whenever I take a picture of it with a regular camera, I can't actually get rid of the sheen in it.
Huh.
You can always see that metallic in it. When you rotate it, you can actually see the gold that's underneath. So it's wrapped around a gold thread. And because it's not wrapped solidly, there's a gap between the wraps. So you get a little of the gold, hence the gilt. You get a little of the gold showing up in the thread that you wouldn't get with something that's completely wrapped. It does hold its shape. So if I wrap this around my fingers and then pull it off, it will mostly stay there. It won't quite stay because I would actually have to couch it down to get it to do that, but it will mostly retain its shape. So you end up with something that's got enough body from the metal in it to be able to stay, but not so much that it's super hard to work with. And because it's thin, as opposed to a really thick one, like I said, I've done French knots with it, and it works really well
Mm.
for French knots. I'm also doing it on a piece where I'm doing like a skip tint background. This is actually the background on one of my needlepoint projects, the one that's kind of a turquoise color, and I'm doing a skip tint, which is where you do a tent stitch, skip one, do a tent stitch, skip one, and then you alternate rows. So you're not filling in the background. It's like a darning stitch almost. And because of the sheen in the gold part of this thread, you get this really interesting light bounce off the back of it, which is
Mm.
just really, really lovely. Again, not an inexpensive thread. So, although I do have people who collect them. I
I
have
won't
a
mention
few.
any names.
Yeah, yeah. I have a few people who either will order one or two, on a regular basis, or where we will just send them one or two on some regular basis because it's just kind of a fun. It's a fun thread to use, even though it's a pricey thread.
Do you,
Sometimes that is unfortunately the case.
Cathe? Do you have a white piece of paper you can lay down? And that really
I
looks like
do.
it's beautiful thread.
Yeah,
Just wanted to see it.
let me turn one of my sheets over and see if that will work better. Yeah,
And
it's always the
I did.
problem of doing it as a broadcast is that
Right.
the camera quality of my iPhone is not bad, but it's not quite the same when it's in a live broadcast. So that's what the color looks like.
Yeah.
Can you zoom that in, Gary?
About a little bit more. That's all I got. You're gonna have to go away from you
Okay,
more.
well
Go
I'll let
away.
me that's okay. Let me hold it up and see if I can get it to
Go away from you
see
more
if I can
too.
get
So
it.
And
Yeah,
Cathe, I've
let
got a
me try.
question. I know some of the colors have been
okay.
discontinued. Are they still making
Yeah.
more? Are
Yeah,
they
they're still
making
making it. Hmm.
they're so
Yeah,
are
there
they making
haven't
more
been any.
colors?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Until they get caught up with making the stuff that they already make, I don't
Uh-huh.
think they're going to add anything. Yeah.
Okay.
My
That has
guess
a.
is that I don't think there'll be new colors for probably another couple of years. I could be wrong about that because you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
but there aren't any that I'm aware of on the books at the moment, but sometimes that changes because even though it might be um, something Lamora has at Access hasn't ordered, sometimes the guy who makes them, comes across something and goes, I wonder if we should do this. And it's like, well, okay, we could do that. So,
Um,
you know,
okay, so we do have a question. Patricia
Mhm.
wants to know, are these threads look like sewing threads?
No, they're
Um,
not. No, made
right.
entirely differently than sewing threads. Now, some of them, like the SWA 100 and the SWA Surfine, which we talked about in the last session, those you can use for decorative sewing, and you can actually use SWA 100 in a sewing machine. You can even use SWA Surfine in a sewing machine, but none of them are made for sewing. They're actually all made either for, like in the case of SWA Surfine, it's made for the haute couture industry. It's actually made for the haute couture houses in France. Um, so it's a different manufacturing process, different companies entirely, but yeah, kind of similar. Similar in the fact that you see them on a spool, but that's pretty much where the similarity is with most of them. Yeah, as well as the
Uh,
price point. That's kind of a whole
oh
Yeah.
other
yeah.
thing altogether. Yeah. And then in the others of the access threads that are metallized, metallic-y sort of things, are the timbre threads. This is a round thread. Most of these specialty ones, so the Gilt Silk Twist, the timbre threads, the smooth passing, all of these are actually made in England. That's still where most of the metallized stuff that kind of came out of the people who do things for uniforms, for heraldry.
Hmm.
That's still where most of that manufacturing happens. There's not a lot of manufacturers left, but the few that are left are in England,
Yeah.
at least the ones who do good work. There are people who are in other countries, particularly in Southeast Asia, who've kind of tried to get into this business, but they don't have the history of how to make them well for them to turn out at the caliber of what most of us are used to. That, who knows what that might look like in 20 years, but
Hmm.
that's kind of where it is now.
Yeah.
Um, the timbre thread that we carry is an untarnished. So you can actually use these two in a project and not have it tarnish. So that means the metal content in it is really, really low. The higher the metal content, the more you're going to get tarnish on something. So that's always something to consider when you're doing a piece. That's one of the reasons why, if you look, like when Trisha has in the past shown off some of her antique caskets, there are parts of it where the metal thread looks very dark, and much of that is just from oxidation, from the what happens over time. Um, there's a smooth passing um, number 5 and a gilt smooth passing number 5. These are similar. The weight's the same. 5 is the weight, so 5 is thicker than a number 7. Um, it depends on the thread as to whether the smaller the number means bigger or smaller. So there's no common guideline here. Like with the
Rats.
Kreinik Japan threads, a 7 is thicker than a 1, but that's not the case for other kinds of metallic
Oh,
threads. It's just
jeez.
like you kind of, some people ask us. I actually, so I own a pair of calipers, which is a digital tool for measuring the diameter of something, because I own, actually at this point, I own 3 lasers. My other really large laser showed up 2 weeks ago. Um, and so I use calipers all the time for measuring material for it. So I've started actually measuring some of these threads with my calipers to see how much of a millimeter some of these are in thickness. Because every now and then someone asks me, they're like, so do you know how thick it really is? It's like, well, I know what it's called. I know how it relates to another thread, but I don't know how thick it is. Let me go get my calipers. So I've started kind of keeping notes about that. Yeah. Just to see, whether, how that relates to thickness, because if you know that it's, say, you know, zero point 0.5, it's a half a millimeter, that's a lot easier than saying it's, a 100 denier, because what does that really mean? So
Yeah.
Right.
I've started
Right.
doing that with some of them. We do have also a gilt smooth passing thread number 4 that's got a silk core. This is another one of the super expensive threads. This is $30 a spool. And that's because of
Whoa.
its metal and silk content. So this is actually wrapped around a silk core. That's not the case for a lot of them. If this is a spool where you buy this, you're probably not going to use it on a single project. It's got 18 meters. You're probably going to use it on a bunch of different projects.
Yeah.
It comes in
Hmm.
silver and it comes in gold. And it's like a lot of things. You buy something nice, but it's not necessarily what you're going to use every day. It might be what you're going to put in a special piece, or you're only going to use a little bit in two or three pieces. So,
Yeah.
but it's a really nice thread. And then there's this set of threads which we call gold silver wire. So this has a smoother texture than any of the braids, whether it's a Veriswa or whether it's Kreining. It's a bit more like the passing threads and the timbre threads in that it's wrapped around a core, but it's a bit smoother. And these come in a bunch of different colors. So there's like two or three shades of silver. There's light gold, medium gold, dark gold. There's copper. There's a whole bunch of different ones. These are a pretty flexible thread. They're 15-meter spools. They're not super expensive. They're like under $5. They're $4.75. So they are. This particular copper one is actually wrapped around a red core, which actually helps with kind of accentuating,
Hey,
pun
Cathe.
intended. Hmm.
Cathe, shove those rainbow galleries out of the way. I think your camera is struggling because it's trying to focus on too many
Oh,
tabs.
that could very well be. There we go.
Yeah,
We'll
just
move
shove
them
those
out
out
of
of
the
the
way.
way.
Actually, we'll do that and I'll just move it a little bit closer. Yeah, that might be better. Might
So,
keep it from
Kat,
trying to go, what in the world are you trying to do there? So
Yeah.
this is
it,
the dark gold wire, and it's actually wrapped around a red core. And the red core, actually, sorry, and the dark gold looks kind of a bit more like a copper because it's wrapped around a red core.
Hmm.
If it were
okay.
wrapped around a gold core or a silver core, it would actually change what the color looks like a little bit.
So
So
here's my
sometimes it's
question,
just,
Kathy.
uh-huh.
Um,
Hmm.
is that what would you use for like a plated braid
Yeah, you
stitch?
could. Yeah, you could. It would be a way to do it without it being a super expensive project.
Hmm.
It's got enough texture to it to look really nice there, but it's not, a $20 or $30 a spool thread. Some of the plated stuff would have originally been done in a metal thread.
Right.
So it would have been done maybe in something more like the $30 Gilt Smooth passing stuff, but you
Hmm.
can get a really nice look by using the less expensive stuff. I have a lot of people who buy the various gold and silver wires because they're less expensive. They can learn how to do some particular stitches with it, and then if they have a project where they really want to use the more expensive thread, they can, and not feel like they're learning on a $30 spool,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
which I think is really, I mean, and I think that's always important. It's like if you're doing a project where you want to learn how to do something, and maybe you don't want to spend a ton of money, but you need to learn how to do the stitches. You need to learn how to read the fabric. If you're doing counted work for the first time, or even just doing embroidery, practice with a less expensive thread and get your general technique down, and then buy the thread that you plan to use and still do some practicing, but then you're not starting from scratch. And
Well,
then
right.
you're less likely to waste a lot of material, whether it's fabric or thread,
And
which
the
I think
plated
is.
braid eats a lot of thread anyway. I mean, it's a thread hog. The plated
Yeah,
braid
the
is. So,
plated braid.
yeah,
Yes, the plated braid eats thread. Yes, that's a
right,
good way of
right.
putting it. Yeah. And so I noticed because I can see the comments that somebody was talking about Cosmo. Cosmo is a cotton thread like DMC and Anchor. It's a cotton floss manufactured in Japan. Their target market is actually quilt stores. They don't actually sell to any of the needlework distributors in the United States. They only sell to the quilting distributors. They are about 5 miles up the road from me, and they've been there for, I think, close to 15 years now, and I have never once had a conversation with them because I'm not their target market. They do have really lovely, it's a really nice cotton floss. it does not have the breadth of colors that DMC or Anchor has, but it has a depth of palettes that neither DMC or Anchor have. So it's the one place, if you need 7 shades of a cotton floss, it's the one place to look. So if you find it either online or at a quilt shop, and you're doing a project where you want 6 shades of blue, definitely go search out the Cosmo thread. It doesn't get called for in any cross stitch charts because nobody really uses it, because you can't get it in needlework stores, because the people we buy from don't carry it, because that's not who they're marketing it to. So, and it's a lovely thread. But okay, so now I'm going to go and talk about the two most common, well, sort of the most common style of metallic threads that almost everybody knows, and that are the braids and the ribbons. And I'm going to start with the Kreinik and the Averrois. So most everybody knows Averrois as a company that makes silk threads, but Averrois has been making metallic braids. They're actually the first ones to do so. They started making them 25, 35 years ago. I mean, they've been making them, they were making them before Kreinik was a company. They're not well known in the States. They're really well known in Europe. We've started getting more of them in the United States in the last 5 years. Access has been bringing more of them in. The color palette for Averrois, Kreinik used many of those same colors in their color palette. There are some differences between the two of them, but the real difference is that the braiding is different, and I couldn't tell you exactly how it's different because I'm sure that's a trade secret somewhere. But the difference really is if you unspool an Averrois metallic, it will drape. It's really soft, it's very supple, it's very smooth. When I run my finger down it, it doesn't catch. And it's just the process that they use for the guy who invented it for them, who passed away a number of years ago. The guy who invented it from them, Jean-Jacques, he just was a master of making machinery do things with thread. And so this is a really fabulous metallic braid to work with. It's what Mary Corbett really likes to use for doing embroidery with, because it is much more drapey. And because of that, you can do a lot more with it for surface embroidery than you can for, it's not as critical for counted work, but for doing things like French knots and lazy daisies and other sorts of really drapey kinds of embroidery stitches, this works really, really well. It does not come in the equivalent of a blending filament in the States. The smallest size is a number 4 braid, and then there's an 8, a 12, and a 16, and a 32. For a long time, most of the colors we brought in, that Access brought in, were the number 4s, because that's what Mary wanted for doing embroidery with. But Access has started bringing in a lot more of the number 12s, because that's more common for needlepoint for 18 mesh canvas. But it's a really, really nice thread, a bit more drapey. So if you've not tried one, we do sell a pack of all the colors of the 12s, but we have the list of all the individual 4s and 8s and 12s and 16s. The most colors come in the 4s and the 12.
Okay, can I time you out here? So do you sell them
Yeah.
like in a pack of reds, like what you're showing there?
We don't at the present time, because nobody
Okay.
specifically asked. I mean, but I have people who will ask. I mean, because you can just order all 5 of all the sizes in the online catalog.
Right.
It has the colors and what size they come in. So if you wanted just the reds and they come in 4 different sizes, you can order one of each of them. It's pretty easy to do. The 032, the red, the green, and the gold and the silver are the colors that come in most all of the sizes, and then the others, some of them only come in 4 because they were asked to bring in a specific color for a particular designer. But yeah, a lot of times we'll put packs together for people, even if they don't see it online. Sometimes someone will say, "So I need like, you know, this kind of
Right.
thread. Can you put that together?" And the answer is yes. Yeah. So, and then the
The,
thing that
the thing,
the
Cathe,
other thing, obviously,
Cathe, the thing that struck me about that when you unspooled it, unlike the Kreinik, it didn't want to jump back on the spool. It looked like it would be a whole lot
correct.
easier to work with.
It is. So if you take a, let's see, let me find the same weight. Okay, so this is a Kreinik number 8. Different color. I picked greens for the Kreinik one because I was trying to pick something I actually had. So the Kreinik one, tends to just sort of stay curled. It springs and it does, as you say, kind of want to go spring back onto the spool. And so when I unspool it, that's what it wants to do. When I unspool the Avera Soie one, it wants to go mostly straight. So it doesn't really curl much. It just kind of hangs from the spool, which is kind of hard to see. But so yeah, it's a bit different. So if you're looking for a drapey metallic, then look at the Avera Soie metallics. And if you want something that is a bit more springy, then the Kreinik one works well. And my guess is that it has to do with the braiding machines and how much tension they put on the thread when it's being braided. The higher the tension, the more likely it is that it's going to want to twist back on itself.
So
So for the mhm.
are the
Yeah, go ahead.
are the braid diameters essentially the same Kreinik to
Correct. They are the
so
same.
okay, so we could interchange those with confidence
Correct.
then.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
so if you're using a number 4 Kreinik now and you want to try a Avera Soie metallic, just use the same number 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it will work as well. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so
Hmm.
the Kreinik is
This
Kreinik,
is not going to be a cheap
yeah,
talk today.
Yeah.
no, it never is. So the Kreinik metallics actually come in a huge range of sizes. I'm going to try and put them in order here. 16, 32. Let's see, here's my 12. And then we got the ribbons. Okay, so it comes in, and if you've ever looked at the top of a Kreinik spool and wondered why the colors are different, is because the color of the, let me move these back farther so you can actually see them. The colors of the the tag on them actually denotes which weight it is. Every weight has a different color on the spool or on the tag on the spool.
Hmm.
So blending filament is the thinnest thing. It's actually not exactly what they make the the braids from, but it's pretty close to it. It's what you would use to highlight something. You can use it on its own. You can add it to another set of threads. Um, and so it's great for blending. That's kind of what it's for. I noticed somebody popped up and said DMC metallic is worse than Kreinik. It's because DMC is not a braided thread. DMC metallics are not braided. They're actually manufactured a completely different way, and that changes the characteristics of just how annoying they are to work with. So
That
then
was
there's
kind.
number 4 braid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's the number 4 braid. It's what I use on a lot of cross stitch, say 28 to 32, occasionally 36 count. If I'm going to go to something denser and I want a metallic, I will use either the Kreinik blending filament or accentuator bijou, which I'll get to in a minute. There's a number 8 braid. So in this case, the bigger the number, the thicker the braid gets. So a number 8 is thicker than a number 4. A number 8 would be what you would want to use on, say, like a 20 count fabric. Number 12 is what we use most of the time on 18 mesh canvas. I also use number 8 braid on 18 mesh canvas because sometimes if I'm doing specialty stitches and I'm having to go through the hole a number of times, it works better with an 8 than a 12. But a 12 covers really well for tent stitch or something, or even basket weave on an 18 mesh canvas. And then there's the number 16, which works well for like 16 mesh canvas. Number 24, number 32. So this would be like a 13 mesh. This would be 32 would be more like a 10, 12 mesh. And then there are the ribbons. So I'm going to open the thickest of the braid just to show you the difference between how thick it is versus the ribbons. So this is the number 32 braid. It's going to kind of stay there and be a bit wiry because that's its nature. And then this is a 1/8 ribbon. Now the thread they manufacture these out of, the base thread that they put together is the same, but they behave differently. So this is actually a ribbon. It's flat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take a 32 and try to smash it a bit, you might kind of get a ribbon, but it'll never be completely flat. So it's
Right.
always going to have some roundness to it. The
Okay.
braids are actually twisted to be mostly round. The ribbons are actually braided to be mostly flat. So that's the 1/8 ribbon, and this is the 1/16. So if you're doing a project where you want to couch it, so this is half as wide, and it is intended to be used flat. Now, that doesn't mean you can't stitch with it. It just means you need to kind of pay attention to what you're going to do with it. So if you want a set of stitches where you want a lot of raisedness to it and you want that puffiness and height, use a braid, because the volume of the roundness of the thread will be your friend. If you want it to be more flattened out and wider and fill it up more that direction, use a ribbon. And that's just sort of the nature of the two different kinds of threads. And then the other thing you should know about these, works for the Avera Soie metallics as well, is when I go to couch these, if I'm going to couch them, I actually find the same color. I either use the same color, so like if I'm using a number 12, I will take a small section of it. I've talked about this before. I will take a small section of this thread. I will, say pull out, cut 12 inches of it, and then I will actually disassemble the thread. I will pull one of these strands out, and that's what I will couch it with, because then it will match exactly the thread that I'm couching,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm trying to couch down. So a lot
Right.
of times people will go, well, I don't know what to couch it with because I can't find anything the same color. It's like, if you can take the thread apart, and have it still retain its integrity, do that and then use that to couch it down. I even do that, side note, I even do that with my, when I'm doing pulled thread work. I will actually, if I'm doing like hem stitching, and I want it to be completely disappear, I will actually pull threads out of my grand fabric. And that's what I stitch the hem
Oh.
with, because then it's exactly the same thread
Mm-hmm.
as what the material is made of, and it will disappear entirely into it. So kind of depends on how close you want it to be. For things like ornaway, which is a gold work technique where you want to see those couching threads, that you would want to use another color. So like if you're doing gold, sometimes in ornaway it will be a red or kind of goldish thread, kind of goldish orange, that they will use for the couching, because part of the ornaway pattern is this couching that you see in it. If you've not actually ever seen ornaway, look it up. It's a really cool technique. It's basically where you take, in many cases, almost spirals, and then use the couching thread to help you generate a pattern.
All right. We have a couple of
So,
questions here.
mhm.
Um, one is number 8 twice as thick as number 4?
Yes, it is
Okay.
actually how many strands of the core thread are actually in it. So there are 16 strands of the core thread in the number 16 braid. So in a pinch, I've done this. In a pinch, I have a number 16. It's too thick. I will remove strands from it.
Mm.
It takes a bit of work to do it because you kind of have to tease it to get it apart. And so I would never do it with a really long length of thread, but I've done it. I've done it with silk lame. Same thing. Silk lame, the petite is, I think, 2 strands of silk and 1 or 2 strands of metallic, and then the regular one for the 18 mesh is like 8, and the LB, which is for 13 mesh, is like 12 or something. I've actually taken strands out to get it to the weight I needed it to be because I only needed a small amount, and I either A, didn't have it, or B, wasn't going to be able to get it in time. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Right. And
So
then
yeah, a
and
lot of
then
times
is
you could.
and then
Mhm.
the other question real quick is Kreinik the only manufacturer of the blending filament?
Well, they're the only manufacturer of what they call blending filament. Yeah, because that's really a name they gave it. They are not the only ones who manufacture a thin metallic thread that you can use as a blending filament.
Okay.
So Accentuate, which is actually, so the person who asked earlier about, who said these look like machine threads, there are 2 exceptions to my comment about no, they're not. And it's Accentuate and Bijou. So Accentuate is actually the spooled down version of a Madeira thread. It's their FS, I think, 40, which is used for machine embroidery. It's not used as a construction thread, sewing thread. It's used as a machine thread. So this is technically a blending filament, but that's not what it's called. It's just a filament. So, and the Accentuate comes in I think about 60 different colors. And it actually is not as wiry as the Kreinik blending filament. I've never seen it get used to turn it into another thread. That's not what Madeira does with it. They literally sell this as a machine embroidery thread, and then it gets respooled in the needlework market for us. So we're not buying a 1,000-meter cone, which I have at home because I do machine embroidery, or even a 100-meter cone. So actually, I think the smallest ones I have for my machines are like 250 yards or something. But yeah, so there are other people who make threads that would be classified as a filament. They're just not called a blending filament. So Accentuate and Bijou would be the other 2 to look for. And the color range and the colors are just completely different than they are for the Kreiniks. Now, Kreinik, the blending filaments, the number 4, number 8, number 12, all of those are all the same colors. And because Madeira, because the Accentuate and the Bijou are not incorporated into another kind of thread, they're a standalone entity. So the Bijou, which is similar in weight to the Accentuate or the Kreinik blending filament, this is Madeira's black core thread. So if you're ever in a sewing machine store and you see um, a Madeira thread called black core, it's called black core because literally it's wrapped around a black core. And it's a machine embroidery thread as well. And it's about the same weight as the Kreinik blending filament. I use it on its own. I rarely ever use the Bijou with another thread, only because I'm after the features of it being a black core as opposed to it getting blended with something else. But you could. So like if you wanted to give a little bit of a sort of slightly silvery texture to a black thread, you could add this is the 484 obsidian. You could add the Bijou 484 to a black silk or even a black cotton and have it give you a different look than if you just added a straight black Kreinik blending filament to it. But these
And
are
I
the
think
only
I've
2 that are actually manufactured for the sewing market, but it's really for the machine embroidery market as opposed to construction sewing. Those are kind of slightly different markets, but you can sometimes find them in sewing stores in a
and I
different
know
spooling. And
I've done couching with that bijou,
yeah, yeah.
and I really like that effect. It just adds a little bit of
Well, and
sparkle.
because these are made for machine embroidery, the texture is a bit
Mhm.
different. Again, you get back to the tensile strength and the drapiness.
Mhm.
If you're going through a high-speed embroidery machine, they need to be able to withstand that. And so they're manufactured a bit differently than the threads made for handwork. And the Kreinik threads and the Averaswam metallic braids, they're actually made for doing handwork with. They're not really made for doing machine work. So, just kind of a different brand. But yeah, in going back to the person who asked about sewing, these are the only two that I'm aware of that really come entirely from a sewing kind of world. And then the other threads that Kreinik sells, some of what they manufacture, some of which they don't. So Rainbow Gallery and Kreinik both manufacture some of their threads, but not all of them. Kreinik manufactures or has manufactured for them most of their threads. There's a few that they get from other sources. They're goldwork threads, which I don't know that Doug's got much in these days just because of supply chain issues. Those are in many cases, they source them from somebody else. Now they might use them, combine them to turn them into something else, but they don't necessarily manufacture the base thread. And they don't, I believe, actually manufacture the base thread for the braids either. They get those from, I think, someplace in Europe, but they do all the manufacturing of the braids. So it's like a lot of companies where the base material, like go into the bakery doesn't manufacture the flour, but they make the bread. So it's kind of the same way. A lot of the companies that we buy threads from, they don't make the base thread that they're all made from, but they do the manufacturing of putting it together in a useful form for us. So it's kind of a different thing to it. So there are Japan threads and there are cords. So the Kreinik cords are twisted differently than the blending filament is. And then those threads are used to make the heavier cords with. So these have a different texture to them. They're more like a goldwork thread and less like a regular braid. The cord actually resembles a bit more a Japan thread. It's a different wrap than the Japan threads are, but it's a bit more similar to that. So, when you get into the other kinds of threads, the color range is not as deep. So for like the cords, there's only about 20 or 30 colors, whereas there's, I don't know, 500 or so in the braids. And then the Japan threads, I didn't pull out the heavier ones. Same thing. So this is a Japan #1. This is the thinnest of the Japan threads, and it's kind of about the weight of a blending filament, only it's not really flat. It's completely round, and it's like it's wrapped around something. And then there's the ribbon, Japan ribbons, and they have a very different sheen to them than the regular Kreinik ribbons do. And they come in, I think the Japans, there's like 8 colors. There's 2 or 3 colors. I think there's 3 colors of gold. I think 1 or 2 of silver. And then there's, I think, like 5 others. I can never remember. The Japan thread is actually the process of how the thread is manufactured. So I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I've gotten Japan threads from a couple of different companies, and the thread, the way it looks when it's not on the spool, is very similar. So I'm assuming there's some sort of standard for how you put it together to call it a Japan thread. I don't know that it's called a Japan thread because it originated in Japan. I actually don't know the answer to that. I'd have to ask. But it's always possible that that's the case. So there are braids in the Japan threads as well. And so the #4, and this is different than a #5 Japan thread, just to make it even more confusing. So for Kreinik, things that end in J and are a ribbon or a braid are made from a Japan thread that was the original, that's a thin thread, that's the base of what they manufacture. but that's different than a Japan 5 or 7, which are thicker Japan threads. They're again one that's wrapped around a core. So, sometimes the nomenclature just gets kind of wacky. It's like, well, are you after an actual Japan thread, or are you after a braid that's got a J behind it because it sort of emulates the look of a Japan thread? It just gets really confusing sometimes. If you're never really sure what it is you're after, sometimes we have people just send us the picture of either the piece, because sometimes I can tell from that, or if they've got it in somebody's stitch guide or a class thing, sometimes I can read the directions and have a better idea of, oh, that's what they're after. And then sometimes we have to go back to the person who's teaching the class and go, so did you know that there's actually 3 different things that are kind of called this? Which one did you want?
Yeah.
And then the other one of the Japan, or not, or the other one of the Kreinik threads, this is a number 16 wired. When they originally came out with it, Kreinik called it hot wire. I don't know why, just because I think Doug thought it was a fun name.
Oop,
And it literally is
we
a
lost you.
a
Hang on.
thread.
Your camera
Okay.
went out there, Cathe.
Oh, hang on. Oh, I know why. Hang on. It's because
And the poor
when
people had to look at me. We can't be having that.
no, I know what happened, and I'll have to log back. I'll have to log back in, because what happened
Okay.
actually, while I when I took the phone off earlier when we were having problems, I forgot to plug it back into the power.
Oh,
So it went off because of that. So do you mind switching back? Just switch back to me,
okay.
and then I'll just show it from here, because I think we'll finish up with this, and then I'll do the Rainbow Gallery stuff in the next batch, because
Okay.
otherwise we'll be here for a while more. Okay, so we're going to here because Cathe forgot to plug her phone in. Not the first time that's happened. So this is hot wire. So this is the wired braid from, actually I need to get it in the right place. I
Other
always
way. There
forget
we
which
go.
direction
Yep.
I have to hold it. There we go. Okay. So let me see if I can turn this so you can actually read it. This is 002W. It's called hot wire. It's actually number 16 braid with a wire down the middle of it. So this is literally a thread with a wire down the middle.
Oh, yeah.
So if you were familiar with the DMC infusions, which they don't make anymore, it was a wired thread that had a smoother core. But if you're after a wired thread, and you're not so wedded to it has to be a smooth outer thing, there's a number of colors of the hot wire. And so this, if I twist this and shape it, it will stay.
Oh, yeah.
Let me it will stay wrapped up like that. So this is a thread you definitely want to couch, because it's almost impossible to work with, even on a thick, a pretty open weave canvas. It'll drive you insane. So, but it's a great thing. But it's a great thing to have in your arsenal if you want to do, like, say, antennae on something, or just give it a little bit of wired texture to something. So that's a good one.
I've used it. Janet Sickler Casey used it in beards, some of her Santa beards.
Yeah.
And that was lots of
because
fun.
you can use the 032 one and kind of make it like it swirls in the beard, and it will stay that way.
Yeah,
You
that's
only really
fun.
unlike most of the other threads where you have to couch it quite a bit to get it to stay down. On the hot wire, because it's a wire, you don't have to couch it near as frequently to get it to stay in whatever the swirly shape is.
Yeah.
So that works pretty well. I'm going to take my phone, having died, because it's already 6:15.
Yep.
As a sign that I will finish. I'll do the Rainbow Gallery metallic stuff on the next one, because that's a whole other category of its own.
Yes. All right. It's been
And
terrific.
if any of you guys have questions about stuff, you can either send it to me. It's cathe@needlestack.com, or send it to Gary, and Gary can forward it on to me. And if you've got things that you want to see covered in the next one, just send Gary a note and he'll tell me. He always sends me a note a few days before. It's like, so can you do? Yeah, I could do that.
All right.
Yeah, Sandy, the wire would be great for adding a lot of 3D effects on things. You can actually use it to build structures. So like if you wanted If this were in a color other than gold and you wanted to do flowers that stood up, you could actually make petals out of it and have it, or even bunny ears, and have it stand up. So yeah, it's a nice thread for that reason. Just the wired ones have a very different, interesting texture to them than, straight up silk or straight up cotton. So there's a lot of fun stuff to do with them.
Yep.
There's a lot of fun threads out there.
Yes, there is. All right, Cathe,
I
thank you
know.
so much. Really enjoyed it. Learned some things.
Okay,
We're out of here. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and see you next week. Bye. Thanks, Cathe.
bye.
Bye.
Thanks.